Hello, my name is Umo. This is University of Pattern Drafting. Welcome to class. This is Module 3, Level 1, and it's on basic dresses. However, today's class is going to be on kimonos. So in this section, we're going to deal with kimono sleeves, ragan sleeves, drop shoulder sleeves, exaggerated dresses with exaggerated armholes like dolman sleeves, and the rest. However, today's class is going to be on this sort of kimono dresses. Here are the measurements that we're going to be needing in drafting this sort of kimonos. It's important to note that to your basic bodice, you have to add about 2 inches. Your basic bodice and your skirt pattern add about 2 inches. The essence of adding 2 inches to your circumference measurement is because you can see that the kimono is loose. Do you understand? It's not closely fitting on the body. So if your bust circumference is 36 inches, add 2 inches to that, between 2 and 3 inches, making it 38 inches. However, this applies to situations where you do not want a close fitting kimono, when you want something like this. Also, to your biceps measurement, you also have to add 2 inches. So on to the pattern draft. I'm going ahead to draft my basic bodice pattern. That's the newspaper that you can see, and I've placed it on fresh pattern paper. So what I'm going to do now is lift up my shoulder slants by 1/4 inch. Can you see? That's what you can see me marking. And so after lifting that up, the shoulder, from the mid shoulder to the wrist is, from my mid shoulder to my wrist is 24 inches. So that's what you can see me marking. That's 24 inches. Can you see that? So now I am going to place my ruler in such a way that it's at the edge of my neckline, and then it also touches that 1/4 inch that I raised up, and then it gets to the 24 inches. Can you see that? So the next thing that I'm going to do now is to measure my wrist. So my wrist is 8 inches. Do you understand? So watch what I'm going to do here. I'll divide that by 2. Can you see that? Making it 4 inches. And that's what I'm going to measure from that diagonal line that we first drew. Can you see that? I'm going to connect that to my armhole. Can you see? I'm connecting it that way with a ruler. So can you see that? However, it's important to note that for kimonos that are not going to be fitted, do you understand? Kimonos with really big sleeves, you have to, as I mentioned earlier, add 2 inches to your sleeve width measurement. So if it's 8 and you want to use maybe 12 or so, add 4 inches and then divide that by 2. And then what you should be measuring from the first diagonal line should be 6 inches, not 4 inches. So as you can see, I'm coming up by 3.5 inches, and I'm going to use my French curve to just through the line, because we can't have a sharp square like this under the armpit. Like it's going to be, it won't even sew very well. It won't sit curve. I'm creating this curve. So can you see that I'm just truing that line? So this is what I have now. So please note that if your sleeve width is something like what is showing on the screen right now, ensure that, meaning that it's going to be loose, make sure that you add 2 inches to your sleeve with 4 inches, depending on what you want to do. So this is me drawing out my back pattern. I'm placing my front pattern onto fresh pattern paper so I can draw my back pattern. So two things to note about it's almost the same thing as the front pattern. The only difference is that you should have a zip allowance if you're going to have a zip opening at the back, and then also the neckline can be different. Can you see that? So that neckline would probably be raised, or something. So that's the only difference. If you're not going to have a zip at the back, then you should have the same pattern for front, both front and back. So this is me cutting out my front pattern, and then I'm going to go ahead and adjust, raise my, so this is my pattern for my basic bodice back, my back basic bodice. So I'm just tracing out the neckline. Can you see that? Which is 3 by 1 inch, meaning 3 width, 1 inch depth. So that's what you can see me tracing out. So this is my pattern that I've cut out. This is my back pattern, and then this is my front pattern. So as I mentioned earlier, if it's going to be a kimono that is loose, because I'm going to show you how to join your skirt pattern to this. if you're making a kimono dress, if it was like the one in the image, like this one, then you will need your skirt pattern. So you would add your skirt pattern to your top pattern. I'm going to show you how to do that shortly. But please also note that first off, the skirt pattern you're using must be for a straight skirt, and then second of all, it must also have that, is it 2 inches or 2.5 inches ease that you put on the top basic bodice, meaning that if your hip is 44, then you add like 4 inches to that, making it 48. So meaning that for your skirt pattern, you should be using 48 inches for the hip. And then as for the length, you can cut your skirt pattern wherever you want the full dress, the full kimono to end. Do you understand? So in showing you this is my skirt pattern. And can you see I'm aligning them together? See, the center front is matching, the center front of the skirt is matching the center front of the top. Do you understand? So in cutting this, please note this on fabric, please note that it doesn't have to have a half cut on the natural waistline. Do you understand? You can sellotape use paper tape to tape your top body, your bodice and your skirt pattern together, so that you have one full pattern before cutting out on fabric. Do you understand? So you don't have any cuts at the natural waistline, you don't have any half cuts. So this is my front pattern, and I'm going to show you how to draft the pattern for a kimono that has a short sleeve. So from the tip of your shoulder, you can measure maybe 4 inches, 10 inches, depending on the length that you want your kimono sleeve to be. So I'm using 4 inches in this case. You can use as much as 5, 6, 7 inches. And so I'm just going to go ahead and connect that to draw a straight line from there. Do you understand? And then I'll just connect it to the armpit area. So one of the important things to note here also is that if you want a loose fitting kimono, like if you want the sleeve of the kimono to be loose fitting, then obviously you should have done that from the original pattern. Do you understand? So as I mentioned earlier, if your biceps round is maybe 16 inches and you want it loose, instead of measuring 16 inches, measure, let's say you add 4 inches to that, making 20 inches. Do you understand? So you should be measuring 10 inches. Do you understand that? So that the sleeve is loose fitting. So one of the things I've done here is drop that shoulder by 1/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an inch. That's what you saw me marking, and now I'm connecting it with a curve. Can you see that? I'm connecting it with a curve, and then I'm just going to draw a vertical line to connect the biceps area of the kimono. So can you see that? So this is what a short-sleeved kimono looks like. It's important to drop that shoulder back so that the shoulder area of the short sleeve doesn't just stand like some form of funny cartoon character kind of dress or outfit. Do you understand that? So at this point, you can measure whatsoever biceps width you want to use. So this is your around the biceps, is your around biceps measurement that should be there. Do you understand? So as I mentioned earlier, if you want it loose, measure, add few inches to that, your biceps around bicep circumference, and then measure. Do you understand? Depending on what you want to do. So I'm going ahead to show you how to draft the back pattern. Obviously the back pattern, the neckline would be higher, and then it may or may not have zipper allowance or maybe allowance to fix buttons or something. So this is what my short sleeve kimono dress would look like. If the kimono dress is fitted, then you can use your regular basic bodice and then your skirt pattern. But if you want it loose, then you should add few inches to the circumference before you start cutting. So I hope you found this useful. Please go ahead and do the self-evaluation test as well as your assignments.